All right, great. Evan Katz, if you're here, we can unmute you and have you come up next.
Hi, Richard. Great to see you as always, although not nearly as good as being in the same room with you in person. But I guess for this event, we'll get a lot done virtually. So great to see you over Zoom.
Yeah. I'll never forget the Capital Con talk in the Edison Ballroom, which if someone's not been there before, it's kind of like a lower quality version of the Great Gatsby, kind of old school decorated ballroom in New York City. And Evan did a 26 insights on raising capital in 15 minutes. I remember you delivering a ton of value per minute at that event. And I think Bill was at that event, who was up here earlier. And one thing that stands out about you, Evan, is that you always have a lot of insights to give. You're like a giving person. You have a lot of case studies, and you point out unique things, but also things that should be obvious, but are for some reason not obvious to most people raising capital. And you always say it in a really helpful way. So I appreciate you speaking at some of our Capital Con events in the past. And we've got a lot we can cover here. This is going to be a little different because, Evan's going to explain exactly who he is, but he's not running an investment firm raising capital for his own offerings. He's really representing hedge funds and private equity funds to help them with their capital raises. So do you want to introduce yourself, Evan, and maybe give us your one-liner?
Yeah, sure, Richard. Yeah, happy to do so. And again, great to be here. My name is Evan Katz. I am managing director and one of the founders of Crawford Ventures, as you can probably tell from the background. Native New Yorker, went to Wharton, Harvard Law School, been on Wall Street for about 15 years, actually going on 20 at this point. And as Richard said, Crawford and I have been spending almost 2 decades raising money for alternative investment funds, mostly hedge funds, private equity funds, venture capital funds, real estate funds. And we have relationships with about 1,000 allocators, endowments, foundations, fund of funds, high net worth families, broker dealers. And obviously, it took a lot of work and a lot of pounding the pavement, as Richard says, and networking over 20 years to develop relationships with 1,000 institutional and family office investors. Also, I should mention, too, spent 7 years on the Hedge Fund Association Board of Directors, twice elected. And as Richard may get into, we have a email newsletter for alternatives that has over 50,000 subscribers among the alternatives community and about $6 trillion of investors who allocate to alternatives. And if you ever want to sign up for it, it's on our website, crawfordventures.com, as is the PowerPoint to which Richard alluded. It is no longer how to raise capital from A to Z. It is now how to raise capital from A to triple C. We're up to 55 tips and tricks. And we get to double Z. I'm going to pull the curtain down, but it's on our website, crawfordventures.com. And feel free to grab it there now that we're into our 8th year of that PowerPoint.
Awesome. You're exactly why I enjoy hosting events like Capital Con, because to have professionals like you on stage that have learned lessons over 20 years and then put it out into 50 concise kind of bullet points of like, do this, don't do that, do more of this, make sure you never do this, etc. is so much value per minute, I think, for members that Capital Con is always one of my favorite events for that exact reason. So one thing that I know that you've done a good job on is use of video. Can you talk a little bit about where you use it or how that's kind of impacted your ability to connect with investors or clients, et cetera?
Sure. Yeah, I guess there's 2 things that we have done with video over the past 2 decades, and not surprisingly, increasing exponentially in the past, say, 5, 6, 7 years versus 20 years ago. With the advent of the internet, and everyone loves YouTube, whether it's for watching sports events or your favorite cat video or something business related, everybody's into video. Everyone has a smartphone. So we've done 2 things with video to really help our fundraising dramatically, and those of our underlying managers, the hedge, venture, private equity funds, and real estate funds. The first thing is we have the managers make a 2 to 3 minute video, absolutely positively not more than that, where they basically say who they are, where they've been, what they've done, what their investment process is, how they're unique, how they're differentiated. And the reason that these work incredibly well, and they don't need to be $10 million studios, nothing like that, but they've put a little time and effort into them. But the B plus version works. And the reason it works is it gives investors what I call a free look at the manager. right now, investors get hundreds or thousands of pitches a year. Richard, as you know better than anybody, and probably the most important things are, well, A, is the person who's knocking on their door someone they already know? Because the truth is, if it's not, they've got a vastly smaller chance of them even reading the documents. But if they have read the documents and it sounds interesting, the investors have this conundrum, if you will. Do they invest an hour on a call with a manager, plus another hour preparing? Maybe yes, maybe no. Obviously, if it's the most compelling fund since sliced bread, they'll do it. And if it's not, they won't. But the video gives the investor a little middle ground to say, so-and-so's fund, this looks interesting. The deck was long, maybe too long. Let me just grab this person's video and watch it for 2 minutes. And investors tell me all the time, like, oh, wow, so-and-so, Johnny or Susie, whatever their name is, the PM or the two co-founders, they sound intelligent. They've got an interesting pitch. They have a differentiated investment approach. Okay, I've now invested 3 minutes watching a video. Now I'll invest the 2 hours for the call and preparing for the call, or the Zoom or the meeting and preparing for the Zoom and meeting. So one of the two ways we've used video is simply to give the investor another way of getting to the promised land with our clients, of allocating, where maybe they don't want to put in 2 hours up front. We give them a way of doing it where they can put in only 3 minutes and get a better idea what they do.
Awesome. Yeah, and I found it's helpful to even label that video in a pitch deck or teaser as a 2-minute video, or even in the email to say, hey, here's a 3-minute video from the founder, so that they know what they're getting into when they click on that video link, and they know they're not going to watch a 2-hour webinar or something like that. And if you have that, when appropriate, you could text it to a client. If appropriate with compliance, you could maybe have it on LinkedIn or send it via email or on a one-pager, a website, a pitch deck. So that's awesome. I'm glad that you have been doing that with your clients, and that's kind of all independent. We only speak like maybe twice a year or 4 times a year, Evan, and you're doing that for the benefit of your clients, the self-interest of your firm doing well. And we're always telling that to our members as well. So it's awesome to hear from someone like yourself with so much experience. So on the one-liner, your current one-liner is related to helping hedge funds and private equity funds prosper is one version of your one-liner currently, right?
Yeah, that is it. And in all candor, like many people in this business, we've got a lot of things down pat, and there's probably 1 or 2 things we could certainly improve upon, which is one of the reasons why we're doing this video today. And
Sure.
that is something we are going to maybe mull around a little bit, letting your hedge and private equity funds grow and prosper. Maybe it should be helping your private equity funds grow and prosper, because helping is a bit more active voice. It makes clear that we are doing something, we are helping you, which is basically what our services are, rather than the passive voice of letting your funds grow and prosper. So in preparing for this, I did think that maybe we should make a couple of word changes on that, just to be a bit more proactive instead of using the passive voice.
Sure. I think everyone here listening would agree that the depth of experience you have is so powerful that it would be a disservice to your expertise, Evan, to say anything that somebody could just say tomorrow. Like if somebody fresh out of Wharton starts a capital raising firm tomorrow, in theory, they could say, oh, we help hedge funds and private equity funds prosper. But what they can't say is that they have 20 years of experience helping raise over $1 billion for 52 private equity and hedge funds, right? Like you have some really hard figures and numbers. It could probably work into a one-liner if you wanted to. It'd be a little bit more of a mouthful. It won't be 4 words long, but it could still be kept relatively concise. Even if you just said, we have helped raise over $1 billion for 42 hedge funds and private equity funds, or something like that. Like we've helped 42 hedge fund and private equity funds prosper by helping them raise over $1 billion.
Sure.
Is my main point. And so I think that's a good example of maybe something that could help with more, wearing on the sleeve all your expertise, which I think a lot of people just get busy and maybe don't do enough.
I think to your point, I think you're absolutely right. It is obviously in a lot more of our detailed documents which get sent around, but you never have a second chance to make a great first impression. So, on your website, on the homepage, you don't want it to have 5,000 words, but if you can get a few more words in, to make the point, I agree with you. I think to your point, Richard, I once called it, I pointed out that McDonald's has that big sign when you pass by every McDonald's, how many burgers they've sold. And, we're not flipping burgers, but, if a firm has raised, over $1 billion for how many thousands of firms, whatever the number is, it's not a bad idea to put that number like McDonald's has their number. And in terms of the experience, you're right. You walk by tons of stores, and what do they say? Established EST 1970 this, 80 that, 90 that, and
Right.
people walk by and they say, "Oh, established. That means they've been in business for 20, 25 years, so they probably know more of what they're doing than someone who graduated B school 2.5 weeks ago." So I think
Right.
you're absolutely right. Somewhere between the Goldilocks, not too many words, not too few words, but it's a great
Yeah.
idea.
Sure. Yeah. And I think some people are just, they are so either humble or not outspoken or not the bragging type, or they're afraid that people are going to think, who's this person think they are, that they're a little bit shy on doing that. And one example of that is my father. He's raised over $1 billion for hospitals and universities. And when he was retiring from a national firm they raise capital for nonprofits like hospitals, he thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll work with some more hospital clients. And so as he was putting together his website, I'll share my screen here, for hospitalfundraising.com. He was shy to say that he's raised $1 billion for over 300 clients over the past 35 years. But I encouraged him to do it, and he checked it out against a few people, and they didn't think it was offensive or too aggressive. But my dad's just not the type of person who's going to go around beating his chest about how amazing he is type person. I know some people might struggle with that as well, just kind of being a little bit more bold in what they're saying. But as you said, if people gloss over the introduction or just think like, oh, it's one more LinkedIn message from some random person, and they don't get exactly how you can help them, then they might not engage with you at all, right? So,
Oh, Richard, to your point, sure, there was a recent, we get about now 300 alternative investment funds and companies knocking on our door every year, sending emails and their documents looking for us to bring our 1,000 allocators to them. And there was one recently that I've got to add this for the next presentation at CapitalCon. They had a pretty good deck. They had maybe 2 bullet points for each person on the management team. And I said, looks like you have a great team and a great strategy and great track record, but where are the detailed bios? And they said, oh, those are in the PPM, in the offering memorandum. And I said, okay, but since investors first read your one pager and the PowerPoint, they're not going to get to the PPM and the offering memorandum. And to your point earlier, Richard, some things that I think are so incredibly obvious, are just, mind blowing. How people would leave out their detailed bios from the PowerPoint. It's the most important thing of all. Or, a friend of mine who still doesn't listen to me, and he sends out his monthly fund update on Sundays. And he sends it on Sundays when most people, like I work a lot of weekends and nights too. I've worked too many nights and too many weekends I like to count. But most people are trying not to work on Sundays. And he still insists on sending his monthly update on a Sunday. And it's a real head scratcher. Like, have you thought about this? So there's a lot of things that are obvious. And out of the 55 points in our deck, maybe half are completely obvious. And yet half the world still doesn't do them, no matter how obvious they are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's why I think earlier Bill said like, oh, a lot of the ideas were simple, but they're really helpful. It's not like 80% of this is not rocket science. It's getting your ducks in a row, being a clear communicator, being very intentful with who you go to and why you're going to them and what you say, and aligning a lot of different things. So if you were to think over, the 55 different tips and strategies, what are 1 or 2 things that for sure nobody should do, and what are 1 or 2 things that you think might be helpful for people to hear that they should be doing?
Sure. Well, I guess I always kind of what they should be saying. I always call it, what Albert Einstein said: make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. So, true story. Actually, when I was a 5th or 6th grader, whatever it was, I was selling with some friends like lemonade and sodas at the Little League games. We had this little business where we were selling lemonade and soda. So, everything can be kind of reduced to that. So, who are you? What is your team? What do you do? Have you done it before? How well have you done it? What's your advantage? How do you differentiate yourself? The deck should certainly be at least 10, 15 slides, probably no longer than 20 or 25. It should be that Goldilocks, not too much, not too little. And basically, like you're talking to somebody, okay, well, we're at the Little League game. The weather's hot. People get thirsty. They forgot to bring drinks. We provide them. We buy it for this. We sell it for that. Pretty much, not to dumb it down, but basically, along those lines. And I mean, there's a slew of mistakes we've seen people make over the years. Most recently, I guess in the time of COVID, uh, you know, uh, basically you've seen a lot of people, kind of trying to go to market with poor video connections, poor headsets. I mean, even something so silly as that, where I've been on calls where they can't even hear the person presenting because they bought a headset for $40 on Amazon. And I've had, it takes forever for me to get these calls with people, and it takes a lot of work, as you well know. And so now we do sound checks, like you said, shave, have a professional background. You don't need to be in a jacket and tie during COVID. That looks ridiculous. Don't be late for the meetings with investors. I mean, simple things, be on time, don't be late, answer the investors' questions. If they need more documents, don't take weeks to get them. We've had some managers take weeks to get them. And I'll never forget this. There was an allocator. I think it was a big allocation, maybe $150 million, who said, "Evan, we love you, man. And the fund and the team sound great, but it took them a couple of weeks to get us the information and documents before they had our money. If it takes them a couple of weeks to get us the information and documents before they have our money, what are they going to be like after they have our money?" And it was an absolutely brilliant point and a fair comment. And and also too, if this is your first fundraise or your first big fundraise or your first institutional fundraise, get a hold of a Richard Wilson who knows how to put you through boot camp and to make sure that you've got the ducks in order and the 20, 30 things that you need to go to market. And if you don't know people already, hire a fundraiser, whether it's me or somebody else, hire a fundraiser who already knows the people, because, we've done studies. I mean, for every cold emailing lists, you can get investors, and you will get some investors. But if you have a fundraiser who already knows the people very well, you'll get more. And the two are not mutually exclusive. Right. You can work with a variety of people who have relationships in the family office world. We do more institutional, and it's a snowballing effect.
Right. Great. Yeah, appreciate you sharing all of that. And I definitely agree on the week's response. I think also the service providers you surround your investment firm or your company with reflect upon you. We made a small investment in a company, and they got our K1 wrong in 4 different ways. And so we said, we need to get this K1 corrected. And their accountant said, sorry, I'm not going to fix it. I'm too busy. And we're like, if a couple of our family offices are going to invest next year, you're going to need to be able to reply to them. And we need a K1 that's not completely wrong. So please try to get it done when you can. And it just reflects poorly upon the company if you have service providers that aren't timely, or if your team is not timely, or you're not organized or paying attention to details. So that's a really good point.
Just real quick, you mentioned service providers too. I mean, absolutely. And get some of the best service providers you can find. A lot of them, if you have a promising fund, will work for half price for the first year or two. They'll have an emerging manager program. Some will, some won't. A lot of it depends upon where your team is coming from. If you've got a compelling team. And the other thing also too is on the CFO. A lot of people outsource everything. And I say, great, you can outsource your CFO, you can outsource your fundraising, you can outsource a lot of your service providers, you outsource everything in today's world. But if you want to attract institutional investors and even some family offices, if there's 2 funds, everything else being equal, one fund, not yours, has at least most of this internal, maybe some outsourced, and your fund is outsourcing everything else being equal, and maybe it never is, who's got the greater chance of getting the allocation? So, a lot of people, don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Try not to outsource everything, because if it's just 2 guys, a gal, and a Bloomberg, it's a lot harder to raise money than if you have at least some people internal who've been there, done it before.
Right. I think everyone feels more comfortable if there's a 4-person team or an 8-person team versus 1 or 2 people, just as a general rule, if everything else is equal. So, good point. Yeah. And, you've had a long track record of raising a lot of capital, Evan. So I don't know if you've ever put together a timeline of all of the developments over Crawford Ventures, but it would be interesting, I think, for potential clients to see, like, we got our first client, in 1998 or whatever. We raised our first $100 million by this date. We reached $500 million, or our 10th client by this date. We've raised $1 billion plus by here, and be able to see over all this time, the wisdom that's probably developed from meeting those milestones. If you needed another visual to add to your one pager, maybe you already have that somewhere and I missed it while skimming through, but I think it'd be interesting just to look at, just knowing how many projects you've worked on.
I think it's a fair point. I mean, it has been no surprise, Richard, the proverbial hockey stick. I mean, I literally, no joke, remember the first hedge fund event I went to was either in Stanford or Greenwich, and getting off the train and knowing absolutely nobody. This was probably roughly in 2003, almost 20 years ago. And a lot of people have asked me, how did I ever develop relationships with 1,000 institutional investors and family offices? And what's that old expression? How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. How do you get $6 or $7 trillion of investor relationships? Network, network, network. It's literally been, obviously pre-COVID, going to 100 hedge fund, private equity, venture capital events for almost 20 years, and becoming a bit more senior, then getting to know everybody and building out relationships, and only showing investors good funds. I've heard that constantly from folks. Evan, we don't invest in every single thing you send us. I mean, goes without saying, nobody does. But everything you show us is high quality, great team, great track record. So we always look at everything. And if we have a need for it, then we take it to the next level. And that is critical, because it's like, when I've gotten 25 people jobs and 8 people married, Richard. I'm a pretty good matchmaker. And people always said to me, the investors say, you always send us good deals. You always send us good funds. We always read your stuff. And people would say, whenever I tried to set them up on a date, I had never set up a horrible blind date. And that's how I ended up getting 8 people married and 25 people jobs. So it's, I think that's it's a good point. Always send people good stuff, and always treat them well, and they'll take your call the next time.
Right. So if anyone's looking for some late COVID romance, I can message Evan here. He might be able to set you up. You never know. So we have a question here from Isaac, though. He said, what would your advice be to someone who's about to raise a first-time private equity fund? Because one big problem that he's facing is that he's in a very profitable asset class, but unfortunately an unfamiliar one. And he put in parentheses, search funds.
Sure. Well, I guess let me break that down. I think there's probably 2 points in there. One is the very profitable asset class, but unfortunately unfamiliar one. Depending upon what that is, that may very well be surmountable. I mean, I once jokingly said that if someone can find me the man or woman who can pick the horses at Pimlico, and we can get that verified and audited, I can raise $1 billion fund around that person. Now, I'm still waiting to get that phone call and that email from the person who can pick the horses at Pimlico. But to Isaac's point, or to answer Isaac's question, I guess it depends on what the strategy is. I mean, at this point, is it crypto, which is becoming a bit more accepted? Is it cannabis, which is becoming a bit more accepted? If it's compelling and it's profitable, one should be able to get the investors over that hump, at least most of them. Maybe there are some stodgy institutional investors who, no matter what it is, won't touch crypto or won't touch cannabis, although more and more are doing it. So I think that's a question of just working with someone like you, Richard, or myself, and a good marketing team to explain why this is compelling, even if it's unfamiliar. Because, I mean, let's face it, everything popular today was probably unheard of 100 years ago, that type of concept. Right. The first-time fund is tough. I mean, first-time funds are tough. I mean, managers often ask me the question, and I'm like, well, do you want the honest answer or the one you want to hear? And they're hard. Although, again, the joke is, with all these funds that are on fund 2, 5, 10, 15, and 20, how did they get to funds 2, 5, 15, and 20? If no one will invest in a first-time fund, somebody must. Right. So I guess the answer to that is find a couple things. Work with people like you, Richard, or someone like me who knows early stage emerging manager investors. I mean, that's critical. If you've got a fundraiser or a fundraising partner who only knows CalPERS, who needs to put $400 million to work and only invest in funds 8, 9, 10, and 11 or something like that, you're going to be in trouble. So work with someone who knows folks who will do the first-time funds. And hopefully the person who's got a first-time fund has some relevant experience, meaning they've been doing banking in the field. They've done a few deals with their personal account, or they were running their own money. Because theoretically, if it's a compelling opportunity, they must have some in the industry. They've done something in the industry. They're not completely starting it for the first time. And if they are truly starting for the first time, then find a partner who's done something highly related for the first time. So at least you can get a hook in that way. And if you have some relevant experience or a lot of relevant experience, or hire a partner who does, better to hire a partner and give away part of the equity and have a big piece of a $500 million firm than to own 100% of a $0 firm. I've seen people make that mistake, constantly. They'd rather give away their firstborn than to give away any equity to founding partners or to a team or something. And, then you own again 100% of nothing or something very small.
Right. Totally agree. A lot of people get hung up on that, and they're just so worried about their percentage of the pie that they don't grow it because they're not willing to negotiate on terms to get a seed investor or an anchor investor or whatever. You see it in many different forms, people being too stingy on fees or too stingy on equity. And on that question from Isaac, and then we'll wrap it up to get James up here next. It does sound like he's focused on a search fund model, and search funds can be challenging because they're asking people to commit the capital before what's going to go into the fund, right? Have you had experience raising capital for search funds, or any quick comments on that before we wrap up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest and candid as always. Until 5 seconds ago, I never heard of a search fund, but I assume it's basically a SPAC for funds. It's similar like a SPAC for funds. Sure. I mean, because investors normally want to know what they're in. SPACs aside, which have had a recent resurgence, I'm not sure is justified. People typically want to know where your money's going. And if it's a SPAC or a search fund, unless you've got a team with great track record, even greater than you would want normally, I think that's going to be a challenge. And in closing, maybe one last point about the equity thing is, I think probably one of the greatest mistakes funds often do is if they don't have enough capital to hire a few people, to hire a team and a fundraiser. I don't mean 40 people, but 1, 2, or 3 or 4. Go to your friends and family, pass the hat, do an equity round where you sell not a piece, not an investment, an LP investment, but where you give up a piece of your firm and your fund to friends and family for $3 to $5 million, which gives you the capital to hire the right people, build things out, not Park Avenue offices with 10,000 square feet, but reasonably build things out. And if you give up a piece of your firm, but it helps you get to the promised land. And I said before, Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs and Tim Cook and Bill Gates didn't become billionaires because they own 100% of Microsoft or Amazon or Apple. The founders of those companies became billionaires because they raised money at the appropriate time to the appropriate people and ended up owning 20, 30 some percent of $1 trillion or $500 billion company. I think the same thing applies here. If you've got the goose that laid the golden egg and your family and friends know you're honest as the day is long, you should be able to raise at least something from them to give you the working capital to then get from first base to second base and then take it from there.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. And Isaac, my last comment would just be that if it's been a challenge to niche it down, because then your deal sourcing will be more simple. Your investor avatar will be directly within that niche, potentially, that you're investing into, and it'll just make your communications much more clear about what your search fund is focused on. So I hope that helps. But appreciate all the feedback, Evan, and thanks for being here today, and look forward to having you at one of our events in the future again.
Looking forward to Richard. Thanks to you, and thanks to the firm, and thanks everybody for listening today. Great to be here as always.
Yeah, take care.